Let's get one thing straight. This isn't just another story. This is your moment. The moment the truth finally speaks louder than the lies. The moment the masks come off and the world sees what you've known all along. You were never crazy. You were never too sensitive. You were chosen. And that's exactly why they came for you. And now, the stage has flipped. The ones who tried to break you are being exposed in real time. This courtroom, it's not just a place of justice, it's the spotlight. And guess what? You're no longer watching from the shadows. You are the shift. You are the proof that rising from betrayal isn't just possible, it's powerful. So lean in. This isn't just a reckoning, it's a revolution. And it starts with you. They mistook resilience for weakness and underestimated a force that's long been underestimated but never extinguished. Now the illusion surrounding them dissolves under the weight of their own deception. The alliances they formed in silence are now unraveling beneath blinding scrutiny. What was once whispered behind carefully closed doors is now shouted into open skies. No longer shielded by the darkness, they find themselves caught in the unraveling of their own falsehoods, each step revealing more of what was hidden beneath the polished surface of their pretense. The ones who wore the friendliest masks are now facing a reckoning that no disguise can deter. They who once operated in secrecy are standing beneath 1,000 gazes, their intentions dissected, their loyalty discarded like a crumpled letter read too many times. What they tried to bury now rises with volcanic force, calling out every theft of spirit, every silent betrayal they committed. But before tracing the path of their collapse, there's a deeper recognition that must surface, a remembrance of the internal flame that drew their envy in the first place. Long before the world named it, something within you disrupted false peace. Without knowing how, you disrupted illusions and summoned discomfort in spaces where silence was currency. You didn't learn to feel the unspoken. You arrived already fluent in it. Institutions shook, not because you defied them, but because your truth dared to breathe in rooms built on denial. Your presence rerouted forces unseen, not by choice, but by essence. Feel God's love stirring within you. Don't let it stop there. Hit the super thank you button and sow a seed of $20 or more. That simple act can ignite hope, heal hearts, and carry His love further than you imagine. You were made to shine His light. This is your moment. Be the miracle someone's been praying for. Let heaven move through you. There was never a moment when you weren't marked by significance, not a scripted destiny, but a pulse that disturbed anything unaligned with its rhythm. That's why those consumed by shadows began their slow hunt, not out of power, but out of fear. Your very existence lit up paths they hoped would stay dark. Their schemes weren't accidents. They were blueprints of suppression disguised as concern. Even the ones bound by blood felt threatened by a fire they couldn't name, much less control. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a momentary lapse. It was a long, cultivated plot, woven across generations through smiles and ceremonies. Gatherings became battlegrounds, masked as celebrations. Their envy metastasized with each obstacle you turned into an altar. Every time you thrived in spaces meant to suffocate you, their disdain deepened. And still, you rise, not because you're untouched, but because you're unstoppable. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. Isaiah 54:17. Just like Joseph's own brothers threw him in the pit, thinking they were burying a problem, They were really planting a seed. And that seed, it grew roots in the dark. It grew strong in silence. And when it broke through the surface, it came back not just blessed, but unbothered. That's the story they didn't see coming. That's the blueprint they couldn't copy. Because what they meant for harm, heaven had already rerouted for elevation. That's how divine favor works. It doesn't ask for permission. They flinched at the idea that someone from their own bloodline might carry a different kind of assignment. Not just a little success, not just a job promotion or some spotlight fame, but a calling with weight, one that threatened their illusions. While they were rehearsing roles in a script called Normalcy, you were born with something that couldn't be taught, spiritual authority. That's what terrified them. Not your words, not your walk, your light. So what did they do? They didn't fight fair. They waited for moments when your guard was down, when you were just being open, real, and honest. They pried open doors you trusted them to keep shut, turned your vulnerability into a ledger. Every time you trusted them with your truth, they logged it, not to protect you, but to use it later. Like Judas at the table, smiling, eating, waiting. But make no mistake, just because they were close doesn't mean they were called. And then it grew. The circle widened. Those cousins you only saw at cookouts, the aunts with those long hugs and longer eyes, they got pulled in too. Not by accident. This wasn't just gossip gone wild. This was a design, a carefully drawn map of betrayal disguised as family ties. They weren't just hurting feelings, they were engineering collapse. But what they didn't know is you weren't building for this world alone. While you were laying down brick after brick in sacred silence, establishing something eternal, they were busy drafting theft in fine print, scheming on things they didn't plant, didn't water, didn't fast for. The things heaven had sealed with your name, they tried to rewrite. Properties, opportunities, even your peace of mind. They moved in on it like they had a right, but you kept building, and they kept stealing. And you know what? That silence of theirs, it was louder than any confrontation. They didn't need to curse you out. They just drained your wells while smiling at the wellspring. But here's the truth, and I need you to feel this deep. You are still standing. And not just standing, you're standing taller, stronger, wiser. You've been through the fire, but you came out with the glow of someone who met God in the furnace. Because they didn't know, you weren't just surviving, you were gathering momentum. What they thought was your breakdown was really your build-up. So let them keep scrambling through your past, trying to make sense of your favor. Let them dig. Every shovel of dirt they throw uncovers their own motives. Every scheme they sketch out in the dark collapses under the light you carry. And child of God, you don't have to fight for what's already yours. Heaven's already written the outcome. You don't chase revenge when you've been promised restoration. This isn't just your story. It's a reversal, a holy recalibration. The very hands that tried to rob you are now empty, and the oil on your life still flowing, still fresh, still sacred. So go ahead and rise. Not in spite of what they did, but because of it. Because they just proved what God already knew. You were always the one. The arrogance reached grotesque levels. They operated under the illusion that taking physical things could rewrite spiritual contracts, that if they redirected resources, they could redirect destiny. In their minds, access to your bloodline meant access to your birthright, as if lineage could override intention or calling. Every tactic was cloaked in forged legality, papers altered with clinical coldness, testimonies rehearsed like stage lines, loopholes manipulated until justice looked away. What was promised to you was brokered behind your back for a gain that couldn't even purchase their own redemption. Yet the most violent part wasn't the assets. They came for what no court could litigate. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. This was not only theft, it was surveillance turned obsession. A fixation that consumed resources like fire, constantly fed but never satisfied. They monitored what they couldn't influence, desperate to decode a force that existed beyond anything measurable. And when human efforts failed, they crossed thresholds they barely understood. They assembled their arsenals from shadowed corners of the spiritual world, summoning anyone who trafficked in curses and control. Old rites, dark intentions, currencies not spoken aloud, all activated in the hopes of collapse. But no matter the names they invoked, the rituals they rehearsed, or the forces they paid in secrecy, they overlooked one truth. What's rooted in light can't be uprooted by imitation. They feared perception more than power itself. What unsettled them wasn't your strength, but your insight, your ability to recognize the schemes behind the smiles and the patterns beneath the chaos. So they devised ways to dim that clarity. Elaborate interferences were orchestrated not to wound your body, but to distort your understanding, to scramble what was once unmistakable. When your heart is full of God's love, it's a sign to give. By tapping the super thank you button and offering $100 or more, you become a vessel of His grace. Your generosity can change lives, reaching hearts you may never meet. You have a divine purpose, and this act of faith carries His light forward. Give now, and may His blessings surround you always. In their desperation, they unearthed long-buried afflictions, hoping to lace your path with echoes of generational dysfunction. Old pain, long diffused, was artificially reignited and rebranded as your own. Ancestral grief that had already been laid to rest was exhumed and placed at your doorstep, reactivated like dormant codes in a corrupted system. But the havoc they unleashed could not outrun its consequences. In a moment of ritualistic overreach, a chain reaction began, one they never anticipated. The energies they thought they could manipulate turned inward. Where their aim was your collapse, the destruction ricocheted. Protection held strong around you, and the forces they summoned turned to collect what they were owed from their summoners. The hidden battleground was far from silent, but every surge against your soul was repelled. The shield surrounding you was not forged from fear, but from sacred alignment. No invocation, no hex, no conjuring penetrated. Their inner circle began to erode, not from attack, but from realization. A fracture opened, not from force, but from guilt, long denied. It started as an unassuming message, one line in a quiet voice, but that single break triggered a torrent. Files thought deleted appeared again. Correspondences once encrypted began surfacing on screens never meant to see them. Audio once hidden beneath layers of secrecy made its way to those who needed proof. Ironically, the very tools they had used to monitor, trace, and suppress became the catalyst of their unraveling. Footage captured for the sake of bragging rights turned into a chronicle of evidence. They had archived their betrayals, never imagining the archives would become exhibits in their downfall. The chain of silence broke. Disillusioned insiders, stripped of loyalty and incentives, began emerging. Some wanted protection, others redemption. Testimonies once unthinkable flowed freely. Investigators listened, stunned at the scale, unsure how such depth of betrayal could have masqueraded as loyalty for so long. Truth spread fast and wide. It left no room for spin. Platforms lit up with wave after wave of confirmation. Communities gasped, not just at the betrayal, but at the sheer detail of it all. Masks fell quickly, and reputations long thought untouchable were swept away in a flood of public reckoning. And as the light reached every corner, the question echoed louder than ever. How did it come to this? The collapse was not quiet. It was thunderous. The ones who'd moved in silence now stood cornered in the spotlight. One by one, the consequences arrived, and the doors they used to close behind them, now kicked open by the weight of truth. They always believed they'd never be held accountable, that their lineage was a shield, that their roles in your life were camouflage enough to keep justice at bay. But when the reckoning arrived, it moved with the force of inevitability. Agents stepped in with unshakable purpose. One by one, the self-appointed untouchables were unmasked in front of a system they thought they'd mastered. Authority entered the scene not with hesitation, but with grim determination, and even the presiding magistrates struggled to hide their revulsion as the facts poured out like floodwaters. What emerged in the pre-trial hearings shattered every illusion of petty family feud. This was no domestic conflict. It was a structured, far-reaching campaign of coordinated harm. Legal representatives stuttered through arguments that dissolved before they were even complete. Nothing could justify what had been done. The gravity of their actions eclipsed every attempt at legal spin. They weren't just on trial for crimes. They were being held to account for a legacy of engineered spiritual sabotage. The court became an amphitheater of disbelief. Spectators, journalists, even courthouse staff sat in disbelief as testimony unfolded like a twisted opera of generational darkness. This wasn't about property or power. It was about something more elusive, the desecration of sacred trust. Those who once stood as pillars of the community were now exposed as architects of spiritual and emotional destruction. Every defense witness brought forward only tightened the net around them. The veil finally fell from the eyes of those who once praised them. Their polished personas, years in the making, evaporated under the weight of truth. The system that many thought blind proved capable of divine alignment. Statutes written for the everyday began to stretch, reaching into gray areas previously ignored. The accusations now carried echoes of betrayal so profound that no legal terminology could truly contain them. The documents read aloud didn't sound like legal jargon. They resembled transmissions from another reality. But beyond those walls, something even more potent began to unfold. Public consciousness shifted instantly. Narratives long dominated by lies were overtaken by clarity. People who had once gossiped about your distance now raged against the very voices they used to trust. The internet, once a quiet bystander, became a storm of vindication. Posts, threads, and streams began celebrating your resilience and exposing their duplicity. People you'd never met lit torches in your defense, drowning out the digital echoes of slander. Their arsenal of lies couldn't compete with the collective surge of awareness rising from strangers who saw the injustice for what it truly was. From the margins of your life, people emerged, some in awe, others with remorse. Individuals once manipulated into playing supporting roles in your downfall now reached out. The illusion had shattered, and truth had carved its path into their vision. Some wept, some apologized, some offered testimony in a final attempt to make things right. Those who once turned their backs out of fear or misinformation suddenly remembered your silence, your absence, your guarded distance, and it all made sense. People in every corner of your past began correcting their narratives. The fog had lifted, and in its place, Clarity now walked with you, unchallenged, undeniable. They built their war on fiction and didn't expect the very walls they erected to collapse under the weight of reality. Within circles they once manipulated, gatherings meant for healing, growth, and connection. Their disguises were ripped away, layers of deceit peeled back, exposing the web of facades spun through false names and shadow personas. The illusion they crafted shattered not gently, but like glass under pressure, as truth surged forward from all corners of the globe, from voices that had walked similar paths of betrayal. What stood before the world in the aftermath was undeniable. Proof, not in theory but in living motion, that alignment with higher purpose creates a barrier no scheme can penetrate. There was poetry in the unraveling, a cosmic rhythm in how justice wrote itself into the script. Every plan engineered to silence you spiraled into chaos. The very gears they turned against you became the engines of their downfall. Their own blueprints became puzzles they couldn't solve. Each layer of deceit required another to maintain its illusion until the entire construct imploded. Attempts to breach your boundaries became the trail that exposed hidden networks, buried files, and decades of buried intent. The very tools meant to erase your presence ended up spotlighting their transgressions. A single act of overreach uncovered years of misconduct. In trying to invade your sanctity, they opened the vault that housed their secrets. Devices turned into archives, not of your life, but of their crimes. Their attempt to drag your name through dirt only made their own shadows more visible. The lies, once slippery, now stuck like tar to every word they uttered. They didn't just lose control, they became the embodiment of what they had accused you of. Their scripts twisted back onto them until they were actors in a drama of their own deception. Lavish illusions crumbled, leaving empty accounts and mounting legal debt. Every stolen gain was now hemorrhaging into a system they couldn't bribe or charm. When your heart is full of God's love, it's a sign to give. By tapping the super thank you button and offering $100 or more, you become a vessel of His grace. Your generosity can change lives, reaching hearts you may never meet. You have a divine purpose, and this act of faith carries His light forward. Give now, and may His blessings surround you always. Celebrations meant to mark your fall turned out to be their own eulogies in disguise. Their moments of triumph echoed with irony. Cheers turned to silence. Toasts turned to regrets. What they thought was a final chapter became a prelude to their exposure. No audience remained to applaud what never existed in the first place. They turned their own lives into parodies, every decision a punchline in a story they thought they controlled. Efforts to sabotage only polished your ascent. Every dark ritual they employed became another line in your legend. Their fabrications acted like stage lights, making your truth stand out clearer than ever. What was meant to be private spectacle turned into public collapse, and everyone watched as the mask melted, revealing nothing but the performers trapped in a play they could no longer exit. While they whispered sabotage behind veils of secrecy, a quiet rising had already begun beyond their reach. Each obstacle they constructed unknowingly became a stepping stone under your feet. The energy they wasted trying to confine your path was rerouted into momentum that widened it. Not only did their hostility fail to stop your progression, it sharpened it, catalyzing a breakthrough they could neither anticipate nor reverse. Paths they tried to block multiplied into networks of purpose. What should have disappeared through sabotage only multiplied in magnitude. Moments meant to isolate you ended up reinforcing divine timing. Bridges thought to be burned were rebuilt stronger. Instead of loss, there was a cascade of replenishment. Returns that arrived from corners you hadn't even looked toward. Your inner reservoir didn't just hold steady, it erupted. Skills long dormant roared to life. Insight sharpened. Sensitivity deepened. Your awareness expanded so rapidly, even you needed time to adjust. Their interference, instead of limiting you, acted like a switch, flipping every dormant gift into full illumination. They reached for suppression and triggered your ascension instead. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. The emptiness left behind by estranged bloodlines was quietly filled by luminous souls drawn to the truth you carried. From unexpected places came allies whose presence felt more familiar than family. Guidance emerged in perfect timing, offered by those who didn't just understand your purpose, they were born to support it. What had once felt like exile transformed into sacred alignment. What followed couldn't be explained away or diminished. Recognition flowed not from vanity, but from alignment. Nothing contrived, just the natural outcome of standing fully in your essence. What was meant for you began to locate you with ease. The resistance they poured into blocking your way now looked absurd in the face of your effortless elevation. Stories about your journey began circulating in unexpected places, not out of scandal, but as signals of hope. Others who had suffered quietly found courage in your resilience. Those silenced by manipulation now had a voice to echo. What you overcame became a blueprint others could follow, sparking their own release from doubt. You weren't just an example, you were evidence, a living counterpoint to every lie. Every narrative meant to dismiss your experience now stood corrected by your presence. And that shift wasn't just symbolic. It sent vibrations through unseen realms. Those aligned with truth felt the resonance. The silent ones stirred. What had been dismissed as coincidence or delusion now stood in full clarity. The silence broke, and the tide answered. What began as a personal reckoning evolved into a signal flare for countless others who bore invisible scars from betrayals masked as love. What you overcame didn't just shift your reality, it cracked open a global silence. Where once there was doubt and denial, now there was confirmation. Your breakthrough became the rallying cry for those who had long been labeled liars, delusional, or dramatic. The tide that tried to drown you pulled back and revealed its corruption on every shore. Attempts to weaponize the unseen were unraveling worldwide. The very methods once used to torment gifted souls were falling apart in real time. Those who built their influence on distortion and domination found themselves exiled from relevance, their rituals obsolete, their strategies ineffective. Your emergence activated a chain reaction. Slumbering voices stirred. Individuals who had spent lifetimes shrinking began expanding without apology. The old scripts of silence and survival were thrown out. We began decoding the methods, deconstructing the manipulations, and reclaiming our names. From isolation, a network rose, interwoven not by blood, but by sacred intention. Circles formed with new rules, no longer defined by shared ancestry, but by mutual clarity. We stepped into spaces that once rejected our light and refused to diminish it. The burden of explanation was dropped. The fear of being too much dissolved. We stopped asking for room and began taking up space designed for us all along. The narrative of suffering without response ended. Attacks were no longer endured as proof of our calling. They were recognized, resisted, and reflected back. Your visibility gave others permission to be seen. Your courage gave birth to a unified presence too large to be silenced, too coordinated to be dismantled. Those who hunted in shadow found themselves exposed by their own momentum. The power they misused turned inward, and the collapse was swift. Titles couldn't protect them. Silence couldn't hide them. Consequences arrived without warning and without negotiation. The scales were not merely balanced, they surged.